Amidst the bone-chilling rain of a Portland night, a young woman huddled with her child at a bus stop, rocking and weeping. With no papers, no place to call home, only one option remained: to sneak into an abandoned, off-limits house. But inside, a strange man ascended the stairs and shone a flashlight directly at her. It was a moment of fate, where one life collided with a heart that had thought itself closed forever. Portland in late December wasn't blanketed in snow, but the wind cut like an invisible blade, stinging the skin. Exhalations of white vapor vanished quickly into the air. In the bitter cold, the neon sign of a fast food restaurant across the street flickered silently, illuminating the face of a young woman huddled on a bus stop bench, clutching a baby wrapped in a thin blanket. Emily pulled her woolen hat further down her forehead. Her throat felt parched, not from the cold, but because it had been too long since she had dared to cry. Baby Noah dozed in her arms, his cheeks flushed, his breath raspy with each small, uneven inhale. She touched his forehead, still feverish. Everything had started less than 3 days ago. "Get out of my house. Right now." Pamela, her stepmother, had said it, without a glance at Noah, without asking if she had any money. "Take that disgrace out of my life." Those words echoed in Emily's head like a broken record, skipping and repeating without escape. She had begged, not for herself, but for the baby. But Pamela had only tossed her a plastic bag with a few old clothes, some loose change, and slammed the door, severing the last connection Emily had to anything resembling family. For the first 2 days, she drifted between bus stops and all-night convenience stores. She had gone to the women's center near Burnside Avenue, hoping to find a place to rest. The receptionist there, a middle-aged woman with tightly curled hair and a name tag that read Carol, had looked Emily up and down, then sighed. No ID. No identification at all. Emily shook her head, offering a faded student ID card with smeared ink. "I'm sorry. New regulations have just been implemented. We can't admit you without valid documents." Even though there were a few empty beds in the waiting room, Carol stood up and politely ushered her out the door. That evening, Emily sat pressed against the outside wall of the city library, trying to feed Noah the last of the watery porridge made from the emergency oatmeal packet from the day before. He swallowed with difficulty, tears welling up as he coughed. She was afraid. Afraid he was seriously ill. Afraid he would die. She had considered risking a visit to the hospital, but without insurance, without papers, without a residence, she knew they would call the police. And like the stories in the news, the child would be taken away, and she would disappear from the system, like hundreds of others. On the third night, they reached Waterfront Park. The wind whistled across the river, carrying icy water that felt like metal. Emily planned to lie down and rest for a moment, but before she could close her eyes, a figure shone, a flashlight, in her face. It was security. A large man in a dark blue jacket, hands on his hips. "You can't sleep here." "I'm just resting for a little while." "No. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." She picked up Noah and staggered away. Her stomach was empty, her eyes stinging. He wasn't crying anymore. His ragged breathing echoed like the wind through crumbling walls. It started to drizzle. The wind pushed cold gusts down her soaked collar. Emily hugged Noah tighter in her arms, walking slowly through the underpass. She stopped when she heard voices echoing from a dimly lit alcove. 2 men were sitting close together, leaning against the concrete wall, passing around a crumpled bag of cookies. One, short and stocky, wearing a torn wool hat, was speaking softly. "I went there once. That house near Alberta Street. Still has a roof, but someone's guarding it. Before I could sneak in, I was chased away like a dog. They said it had burned down. Someone died there. If you show your face there at night, you're asking for trouble." The other sniffed, his voice hoarse. "I don't care. A roof is good enough. I'll try again when the weather's better." Emily stood still, holding her breath in the shadows. She didn't know if they had seen her, but she didn't dare step out. Just enough to hear, enough to understand. There was a place. Not guaranteed, not safe, but with a roof. She had no other choice. Holding Noah tighter, Emily turned away, heading southwest, as the man had said. Her stomach was empty, her feet numb. But in her heart, there was only one thing. If she didn't go there, there would be nowhere else to go. Now, in the drizzling rain, she hugged her child tighter. One hand held the thin blanket, the other pressed against his back, transmitting the last bit of warmth left in her body. Noah whimpered softly. His eyes were closed tight, his lips cracked, but his tiny hand still gripped his mother's finger. Emily bowed her head, burying her face in his neck, her lips trembling as she sang the lullaby she hadn't dared to sing in a long time. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The song broke, fragmented between sobs. The rain began to fall harder, mixing with the sound of cars fading in the distance, dissolving into the freezing night. The bus stop was empty, except for her and Noah, like two silent shadows, nameless, homeless. No one saw them. No one asked them what they needed, but Emily still held the baby tight, as if somehow, just by not letting go, she was still a mother. Still had someone to live for. Tomorrow she would go, find that abandoned house. Whatever it was, at least it had a roof. And if God was still watching someone on this earth, perhaps he would watch a mother singing in the rain. The road to the abandoned house lay precariously between two contrasting neighborhoods. On one side, a row of high-rise buildings with brightly lit signs. On the other, an abandoned parking lot and unfinished construction, littered with trash and rubble. Emily walked carefully on the damp ground, the torn toe of her canvas shoes soaked from the night's rain. Noah slept soundly on her shoulder, his breathing occasionally faltering. The old house appeared behind a broken iron fence, a two-story brick building, its facade mottled like an old person's skin, the ground floor windows long broken, dry vines winding around the window frames. A smudged sign was posted on the front door. "No trespassing. Do not enter." Emily knew it could bring trouble, but she also knew that if she and Noah didn't enter, they wouldn't survive another night. The door wasn't locked, its hinges groaning dryly when she pushed it gently. Inside, it was cold and dark, a musty smell clinging to the air. Light from the broken windows cast faint shadows on the dust-covered floor. She didn't dare turn on the light from her phone. It would be easy to spot if anyone was watching. By the instinct of a mother, she reached out to feel her way, gently ascending the stairs. The attic was a small room with a sloping ceiling and a round window, half broken. Wind rushed through the cracks in the glass, making a long whistling sound. Emily sat down on the hard, wooden floor, pulling out her only coat and laying it down, placing Noah on it and hugging him close. And though it wasn't very warm, lacking and dark, at least the house protected the two mothers and children from the cold winds blowing directly on her, the freezing winter rains. The next morning, the cold sunlight of winter shone into the room, as if to remind her that another day had begun, and she still didn't know what the future held. But unlike the streets, at least here, no one would chase her and her child away. No one shouted at her. No one looked at them as a burden. She cleaned a corner of the room, finding an old plastic tub in the storage room, wiping away the rainwater that had collected on it. The water she collected from the broken gutter outside, cleaner than she thought. In her backpack, There was still some oatmeal from the aid center. She soaked it in cold water and stirred it with her hands, trying to make a watery porridge. Noah still had a fever, but his eyes sometimes opened to look at his mother, then closed again as if tired. Emily placed her hand on his forehead, murmuring a few sad lullabies. Small tasks, like washing his face with cold water, drying clothes on the broken window frame, became tasks that helped her keep her mind steady. She didn't know who this house belonged to, but it had been something: a repair shop, a small office, or someone's home. The blurred crayon marks on the wall, the scribbled drawings could be from a child. At one time, there had been human warmth here. At the same time, not far away, a silver Cadillac parked neatly on the side of the road. A middle-aged man, in a thick overcoat, holding a stack of papers and a phone, got out of the car. He looked at the house with a thoughtful expression. Ethan Blake, 45 years old, owner of dozens of properties around the state of Washington, was a man who lived by rules: buy, fix, sell. He's quick and efficient, without emotional entanglement. But something kept him from demolishing this house. "There's something unfinished here," he had once told his assistant, without further explanation. Ethan unlocked the door with a master key, the creaking hinges making him frown. It was darker inside than he remembered. His footsteps left clear footprints on the layer of dust. The musty smell made him wince. He checked the rooms, thoroughly, as always. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, nothing unusual. But when he went upstairs, he began to feel strange. There was a new scratch on the railing. A wet towel was hanging on the doorknob of the attic. Ethan narrowed his eyes. These weren't signs of time, but signs of the present. He took out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and gently pushed open the door to the top floor. The smell of people. He felt it clearly, the breath of life amidst the rusty cold of the abandoned house. The light swept across the ceiling, falling on the corner of the room where a huddled figure was holding a baby tight. She turned her face, her eyes wide, recoiling instinctively. The child in her arms coughed, then whimpered softly. Both froze. For a few seconds, only the sound of wind blowing through the broken window frame. The woman, hair tangled, clothes crumpled, face pale from lack of sleep and cold, looked at him as if he were the last nightmare come to life. Ethan said nothing for a few seconds. He had never seen eyes like that, eyes that were both pleading and ready to fight. She didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't run. Just hugged the baby closer, as if her small body was the last wall between her son and the world. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and even, without anger, only alertness and caution. The woman swallowed. She didn't answer immediately. Her dry lips moved slightly. I just need a few days. Just a place to spend the night. Please don't chase us away." Ethan looked at the baby. He couldn't have been more than a year old, his cheeks flushed with fever, his lips cracked, his eyes swollen, as if he had been crying all night. His heart, which had been frozen since that fateful day years ago, suddenly felt like someone had struck it a slow and deep blow. That unfamiliar feeling, soft, weary, but distinct. He didn't know what to say. This wasn't in the plan. He didn't know what to do with a trembling woman and a sick child in his own house. But he couldn't chase them away, couldn't walk out of here as if he had never seen them. "The boy needs a doctor," he said softly. The woman nodded very slightly, her lips pressed tight, as if afraid any sound would let someone out there know they existed. Ethan stood still for a long moment. Then he sighed. "What's your name?" "Emily." "All right, Emily. I won't call the police, but I'll be back tomorrow. The boy needs to be checked, and You need a better place than this freezing attic." Emily looked at him, unblinking, and for the first time, her eyes were wet, but her voice was still steady. "Thank you, but I won't bother you for long." Ethan didn't respond. He just looked at them one more time, then went downstairs, stepping out of the house. The leaden sky hung heavy like his mind. The seemingly deserted house turned out to still hold human warmth. Not from the past, but from a mother trying to keep her child alive each night. The next morning, light streamed through the broken window, illuminating the thin layer of dust covering the wooden floor. In the corner of the attic, Emily sat leaning against the wall, head drooping on her shoulder, one arm holding Noah tight, the other gripping the strap of her backpack as if afraid someone would snatch it away at any moment. Noah still had a fever. The fever wasn't higher, but it had been lasting so long that his cheeks were flushed, his body hot, as if he had swallowed coal. Last night, Emily had soaked a towel in cold water, wiping his forehead and chest all night. Sleep didn't come fully, only broken snatches between his dry cough and the worry that felt like a murmur in her bones. The sound of the door opening downstairs made Emily jump, her heart clenching instinctively. She hugged Noah tighter, breathing faster. The footsteps were steady, slow, then a soft call. "Emily?" "It's me. Ethan." She still didn't answer, just stared at the soon-to-be-opened door. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a paper bag from the pharmacy and a nylon bag containing sandwiches, juice, wet wipes, and a clean bottle of water. He saw Emily's expression, the wary eyes, the dry lips pressed tight, and stopped short. "I didn't come to scare you." He raised his hand slightly, as if to reassure her. Emily stood up, placing Noah down and stepping forward, blocking the child. "I'm not begging for food," she said, her voice more firm than her haggard appearance suggested. Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." A silence passed. "I'm not giving because of pity either. I brought it because I think a child needs to eat when he's sick." Emily's eyes wavered. She looked at Noah, his cheeks red as embers, his dry, cracked lips bleeding. "How long has he had a fever?" Ethan asked. 3 days, she replied quietly. "What have you done to lower the fever?" Emily turned away. "I don't have medicine. I use cold towels and keep him warm." Ethan placed the bag of medicine down. "This contains acetaminophen for children. I called a doctor I know. She said she'll stop by in an hour if you agree." "No," Emily shook her head immediately. "I don't need a doctor. The police might come with them." Ethan stepped back slowly, not crossing the threshold of the room, keeping a distance as if afraid to break the fragile barrier she had built. "Doctor? Lena is someone I've known for a long time. She helped my ex-wife give birth. Very discreet. Trust me, she won't do anything besides help Noah." Emily was silent. Her eyes were watering, but her head still shook. Ethan said nothing more. He slowly took out a bottle of water, poured it into the plastic lid, and placed it on the floor, then turned to leave. As he stepped down a few stairs, her voice rose behind him, hoarse as the wind through an old curtain. Just the doctor, no one else. Ethan didn't turn around, but he nodded and continued down, leaving a new silence, no longer tense, but hovering between caution and acceptance. Dr. Lena arrived on time. A petite Asian woman wearing round glasses and a thick coat closed at the neck climbed the attic with an old medical bag. Ethan stood waiting downstairs, eyes looking up at the ceiling as if afraid she would encounter something unexpected. Emily let her in after asking 3 times, "Are you alone?" Dr. Lena didn't ask many questions, just sat down beside Noah, smiling gently. Such a beautiful nephew. She checked him quickly, thoroughly, and without judgment. Viral fever, probably due to the cold environment and malnutrition. Needs to be kept warm, take the medicine at the right dose. I'll leave some supplements and vitamins." When she came down, Ethan quickly stood up. She just nodded slightly and said, "Those two mothers and children need to be left in peace, not forced." Ethan didn't respond. He looked down at the bag of medicine she handed back, silently nodding. That afternoon, he returned to the attic. This time Emily wasn't hostile. She was sitting wiping Noah's forehead with a clean towel, one of the things Ethan had left. "Did he take the medicine?" he asked. Emily nodded, but didn't look up at him. She seemed tired. Not tired physically, but tired of being too used to fighting against all kindness. Ethan sat down on the edge of the floor a few steps away from her. He looked at Noah. He was sleeping more deeply than before, breathing evenly, his face less tense. "I used to have a son," Ethan said after a moment of silence. Emily didn't react, but her shoulders moved slightly. He was 10 years old, loved building Lego and apple pie. He took a light breath. "He died in a car accident. I was driving that day. A truck ran a red light. I lived, but he didn't." Emily squeezed Noah lightly. "My wife couldn't live with me after that. I'm not me anymore either." Ethan looked at Noah, his eyes softening. "When I saw him..." Noah, for the first time, "I just thought I couldn't turn my back like I had before." Emily looked up slightly. Her eyes met his. There were no words, but something between them was transferred in silence. He slowly stood up, stepping closer, then suddenly reached out his hand. "Can I hold him?" "If you allow it." She hesitated, looking at Noah, then at the man. A very slow nod. Ethan bent down, gently supporting the baby. He placed Noah on his hand, back straight and steady. That feeling, heavy, warm, trembling, flooded back like a memory from another world. Noah stirred in his arms. His eyes opened slightly. Then his lips curved into a very small line, like the first ray of light after a storm. A smile. A real smile. Ethan held his breath. He looked at that small face and spoke as a breath without thinking. "He has a smile, like my son." Silence after that sentence lasted a long time. The whole attic seemed to go silent. Emily bowed her head, her eyes wet. She didn't wipe away the tears, didn't hide them, because, in that moment, between the man carrying an unnamed wound and the mother struggling to hold her child amidst an indifferent world, a first beat of trust had formed, a fragile piece of trust, like a breath. But it was real. Light shone dimly through the windshield. The grey sky of a January morning stretched out like a cold cloth over the city. Ethan steered the car onto a small street near a residential area in South Seattle. In the back seat, Emily sat silently, hands resting on her lap, while Noah slept soundly in the car seat. He was healthier, his cheeks still flushed, but no longer feverish. Emily glanced out the window. The modest rows of houses passed by, mixed with leafless trees, hair salon signs, and small grocery stores. Everything looked real. It had been a long time since she had felt like she was going somewhere without fearing being chased away. "We're almost there," Ethan said, not looking in the rearview mirror. His voice was even, but light enough to make Emily less tense. The car parked in front of a 2-story building, painted light blue, with a hand-carved wooden sign, "Hope House, Support Center for Single Women and Children." Ethan turned to look at her. "Just try one session. If you don't like it, you don't have to come back." Emily nodded slightly, not exactly agreeing, but no longer refusing. The reception area was clean, the smell of toasted bread and new plastic mixed in the air. A woman with neatly tied black hair, around 30 years old, came out of the office inside. Her name tag, pinned to her shirt, read, "Sarah Kim, Social Worker." "Mr. Blake," she nodded. "It's been a long time since I've seen you bring someone here yourself." Ethan smiled socially. This is Emily. She needs a fresh start. Sarah glanced at Emily from head to toe. Her eyes weren't malicious, but sharp enough to make Emily take half a step back. Have you ever worked before? Emily shook her head. I used to go to college, but I dropped out. Sarah quickly wrote something on the admission form. Where are your ID documents? Emily was silent. Ethan spoke up. I'll take care of the legal aspects later. For now, let her try the skills class and cooking group. Sarah nodded, not asking more. The kitchen is at the end of the hall. Follow me. Ethan placed his hand lightly on Emily's shoulder as she walked away, like a silent wish of good luck. The communal kitchen was a warm room, full of the sound of knives chopping and the smell of stir-fried onions. Emily was assigned to chop vegetables for the stew. Her hand trembled slightly as she held the knife, but quickly found its familiar rhythm. A young girl, with curly brown dyed hair, around 18 years old, leaned closer. New here? Emily nodded. I'm Megan. Have a 3-year-old son. Just got here 2 weeks ago. And me... She lowered her voice, smiling faintly. I'm still getting used to not being ashamed of my past. Emily didn't respond, but for the first time she saw a non-judgmental look, and it made her throat tighten. In the afternoon, she sat in front of an old laptop in the computer room, the keyboard a little stuck, and the screen scratched in a few places. Sarah placed a blank resume in front of her. What did you study? Early childhood education. Then write it here. Then the temporary jobs you did, babysitting, helping at a restaurant, anything. Emily placed her hands on the keys. Her fingers didn't move right away. The first line, name, Emily Carter. Next, education. Her hand trembled as she typed the line. Formerly a student at the University of Oregon, Department of Early Childhood Education, 3rd year. She had never said that to anyone since being kicked out, had never admitted to anyone, including herself, that she had once had a different future. A tear suddenly fell on the keyboard. Emily quickly wiped it away. No one was looking. But for the first time, she felt like she had just set foot on a rock in the middle of a raging stream. Emily remembered very clearly the first day she met Kyle, in the large lecture hall of the Department of Early Childhood Education. She was a first-year student, still had bangs, always sat in the front row, taking notes in full. Kyle walked in late, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his backpack worn to one side, and his smile seemed to mock the whole world. He was studying political science, but had chosen educational psychology as an elective. To understand how children are programmed from a young age, he said, jokingly. Emily didn't like people like that, but Kyle always seemed to care. He asked her for help with her homework, invited her to work on groups, then waited for her after class with a hot coffee with the invitation, "Just friends, that's all." The girl who was living far from home for the first time someone who was both smart and confident paid attention to her. Emily didn't have many reasons to refuse. When she found out she was pregnant, Kyle was silent for a long time. Then he said, his voice still gentle, but his eyes colder than she had ever seen. "This shouldn't ruin everything you have. And me too. I'm preparing a campaign for the position of assistant congressman. You want me to get rid of it? You have to decide for yourself. But if you keep the baby, I can't be with you." Emily left the dorm one rainy night, taking nothing but a small backpack and the first ultrasound result. She called her father, but the person who answered the phone was Pamela, her stepmother, and her voice was as cold as ice. "Your father isn't here, and if you embarrass the family, never come back. No Kyle, no family, no place to go. Emily rented a cheap room near the hospital, worked extra shifts at the coffee shop, studying and pregnant. By the 7th month, she fainted in the middle of her shift. The school called her guardian, but no one came. They thought she no longer had the conditions to continue her studies and gave her temporary leave, a beautiful term for being pushed out of the university door. She had promised she would never mention Kyle Hargrove's name again. Yet now, sitting in the quiet room in the support center when typing the lines about her past education, her hand trembled. Formerly a student at the University of Oregon, Department of Early Childhood Education, 3rd year, not to hold on to an old time, but to look straight at it, to no longer avoid it, because there are things only lost forever when we refuse to admit they were ever real. At the same time, Ethan sat in his office on the top floor of a downtown Seattle building. Outside, light rain fell on the glass. He opened a drawer, taking out a small old wooden box. Inside was the accident file, the police report, crime scene photos, a crumpled car, and finally, a wrinkled photo. A blonde boy wearing a red shirt, smiling in his arms. His son, Lucas. Ethan looked at the photo so long that the coffee in his hand went completely cold. A soft knock came. Marcus Bell, a lawyer, a close friend from college, walked in, his coat wet with rain, holding a leather briefcase. "What are you really doing, Ethan?" Marcus asked, without going around in circles. Ethan didn't turn around. "Helping a mother and child. Do you think that will make up for what was lost?" Ethan was silent. Marcus sat down opposite him, his voice softer. "Lucas is Lucas. Emily and her child aren't replacements. Don't turn them into an excuse to punish or redeem yourself." Ethan put the photo down on the table, looking into his friend's eyes. "I don't think it's replacing. I just don't want to abandon anymore." Late afternoon, Ethan returned to the center. As he walked in, the air in the kitchen was full of the smell of apple pie. He caught sight of Emily smiling, a real, rare smile, as she helped Megan flip the cake out of the mold. He didn't speak, just stood silently in the doorway, watching. When she turned around, catching his gaze, that smile didn't fade, just softened. "The first cake I've made that hasn't burned," she said. Ethan nodded. "Seems like a good start." Then he held out a photo printed from his phone, taken in the computer room. Emily was sitting typing, Noah standing next to her, hand leaning on his mother's shoulder, the light from the window shining lightly through their hair. "I thought you'd want a copy of that moment," he said softly. Emily took it, her hand trembling slightly. She looked at the photo for a long time, then looked up, not needing words of thanks, but her eyes were less foggy. For the first time in months, something rose up from deep inside her. Hope. Kyle Hargrove sat on a leather chair in his office on the 26th floor, the large screen in front of him glowing with the logo of a local online news site. The headline ran bold: "Famous businessman Ethan Blake sponsors homeless single mother, humanitarian act in the cold winter." Below was the photo. Ethan standing next to a young woman holding a baby boy. She was smiling, her face tired, but her eyes warm. The baby, with light brown hair, hugged her neck, smiling wide at the photographer. Kyle stopped short. The photo felt like something had pricked straight into his chest. That girl. It was Emily. And the child. Kyle felt a chill down his spine. Even though he had never seen Noah once, he knew. Those eyes, that mouth, was a copy of himself as a child. The two mothers and children used to live wandering around. No papers. No one knows who the child's father is. That sentence from the article kept repeating in Kyle's head. If this was revealed, if someone recognized, his career would not only waver, it would collapse. That same afternoon, at a law office in the center of the city, a woman in a grey vest, thin glasses, was sipping unsweetened coffee. Tasha Lopez, a lawyer specializing in handling complex issues for politicians, looked through the file Kyle had just placed on the table. "Let me understand clearly," she said. "You were in a relationship with this girl since you were in college, right?" "That's old news," Kyle snapped. "I didn't know she kept the baby. I paid her to disappear." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "And now she's being sponsored by Ethan Blake, one of the most powerful voices in the charitable world. She can shatter my upcoming campaign. It must be stopped." "Immediately." Tasha closed the file. "I'll handle it. No trace left." The next morning, at Hope House, Emily was sorting through the old clothes for the charity handout when Sarah approached. "Emily, a representative from the Social Services Agency wants to meet you. She said she needs to assess your childcare conditions according to procedure." Emily stopped short. "Have I done anything wrong?" "Number just a random check. Don't worry." An hour later, Tasha Lopez appeared, hair neatly tied, eyes sharp, but her voice strangely soft. "I came under the direction of the city's social work department," she said. "We received a complaint that there are signs of child neglect." Emily turned pale. "A complaint? From who?" "I'm not allowed to disclose it." Tasha glanced around the small room where Emily and Noah slept. The blanket was folded neatly. The cabinet had a few old toys. The corner of the room was a scribbled drawing Noah had made yesterday. "Have you ever been treated for postpartum depression?" Tasha asked without warning. Emily stared blankly. "I was prescribed medicine, but I'm fine now. I take good care of my child," Tasha wrote coldly. "Do you have medical documents confirming that?" Emily clenched her hands. "I don't think I have to prove that I'm a mother." Tasha just smiled. "Sometimes you're not the one who decides that." A silence filled with suffocating air. Emily didn't answer, but her spine straightened a little, her eyes no longer avoiding. She knew if she couldn't make them believe, at least she wouldn't let them make her doubt herself. The news reached Ethan right at noon that day. He was in a meeting with a new charity fund planning group when Sarah called urgently. "Someone came to check on Emily, and I suspect they're not really from the city government." Ethan immediately abandoned the meeting. On the way driving, he called Marcus. "I need to verify someone named Tasha Lopez." An hour later, Marcus texted back, "Lopez works for Kyle Hargrove, and I'm sure you know that name." Ethan stepped hard on the gas pedal. When he arrived at Hope House, Emily was huddled in the corner of the waiting room, eyes red. Sarah stood beside her, angry, but still calm. Tasha just left. She said she'll send a report on Emily's living conditions, but the way she asked, the way she took notes, it's all aimed at proving she's not capable of raising a child. Ethan looked at Emily. "Did you say anything?" She shook her head. "I don't know why they came. I thought I was safe." Ethan suppressed his anger. "You didn't do anything wrong. Someone's behind this." The next day, Kyle came to the construction site where Ethan was supervising a new social housing project. He was wearing a vest, shiny shoes, a politician's smile always on his lips. But his eyes were restless. "I want to talk to you." Ethan crossed his arms. "I don't think we have anything to say." Kyle didn't beat around the bush. "I know her. Emily. I'm the child's father, and I want to get my child back." Ethan stepped forward a step. "You just remembered her now. I have a responsibility, and I will ensure the best future for the child." Ethan stared into his eyes. "By threatening, by sending lawyers to threaten Emily, digging up the past to label her a bad mother. She used to be mentally unstable. I have the right." Ethan clenched his hand. His voice was not loud, but as decisive as an axe chopping down on the table. Listen carefully, Kyle. I've lost a child before, and I won't stand by and watch another child snatched from his mother's arms just to serve a campaign. What are you going to do to me? Kyle sneered. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low. I'll stand by Emily, no matter what. The silence after that sentence was like a storm about to break. Kyle turned away, but the eyes he left behind were like a threat unspoken. That afternoon, Emily sat beside Noah's bed. The boy was playing with the crayons. She heard the door open, the familiar footsteps. Ethan walked in, holding a file. He sat down beside her, handing her the papers. These are the temporary legal documents I'm having Marcus prepare. Evidence from the center, Dr. Lena, both photos and videos of Noah's care. Emily took each paper, her fingers still trembling. They might not give up, she said softly. They might take him away. Ethan looked at her, but I won't let that happen. She looked up, for the first time in so many months, her eyes not just full of water, but also something bigger, belief. The snowstorm hit suddenly, as if the entire city of Seattle was submerged in a layer of white powder. The familiar streets disappeared under the thick snow, the bare trees covered in ice, the yellow lights of the temporary shelter where Emily and Noah lived, blurred behind the frost-covered glass. Noah was sitting drawing with crayons on the table, his cheeks flushed with cold, while Emily carefully pasted each job application into a cardboard cover. Outside, the wind howled in gusts, pounding on the corrugated iron roof like drums echoing from afar. On the other side of the city, Derek Scott, the construction supervisor Ethan was investing in, walked quickly into the temporary office, his face red with cold, his eyes flashing with an unpredictable urgency. He knocked on Ethan's office door just as he was preparing to return to Hope House. "We have a problem," Derek said, his breath carrying the smell of cheap cigarettes. Ethan turned around. "What problem?" Derek pulled out a clear plastic bag. Inside were odds and ends, a screwdriver, an old wallet, and a broken phone. "I found this in the warehouse, where only insiders are allowed in, and the cameras were cut off 3 days ago." "What are you talking about?" Ethan frowned. "That girl, Emily. She might have sneaked in. There are footprints, strange objects, and I have people who saw her around there." "Do you have evidence?" Derek shrugged. "Number. But if the police ask, she'll be the main suspect, especially since she doesn't have official work records." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Don't speak vaguely without concrete evidence." Derek shrugged. "I just think she's trouble. And Kyle has already raised the issue. Shouldn't we think about the big picture?" Ethan didn't speak, but his eyes had changed from cold to angry. He took a step forward. Just one step, but enough for Derek to step back slightly, even though he tried to maintain his composure. "You know, Derek," Ethan said slowly, "I used to think, like you, that some things should be handled neatly for the sake of the common good." He paused, his eyes not leaving the young man's face. "Until I realized it was that same big picture that swallowed my son, and I won't let it swallow anyone else, even just another child." Derek opened his mouth to say something, but Ethan had turned away. "This is no longer about her," he said, his voice deeper. "It's about me." Then he left the hallway, leaving Derek standing silently in the sound of the wind blowing through the slightly open window frame, as if the place had just lost a part of its warmth. That evening, Emily was lulling Noah to sleep when she heard a car braking hard outside the door. She looked up, a feeling in her stomach tightening instinctively. Knocking rang out urgently. Sarah ran to the door, just opened it slightly when it was pushed open. 3 men walked in, led by Kyle, followed by 2 strangers in dark clothes, large and silent. Kyle's face was as cold as ice, his mouth smiling, but his eyes not smiling at all. "I've come to pick up my son," he said. Emily hugged Noah to her chest. "You have no right, no judgment, no orders at all." Kyle held out a paper. "Temporary custody authorization, signed by a lawyer. And, if you don't cooperate, there will be an arrest warrant for abusing property and neglecting minors." Emily's face turned pale. Sarah tried to squeeze in, "This is an act of illegal coercion. We haven't received any valid documents from the department." Kyle turned to signal. The two men began to step forward. Emily screamed, hugging Noah tight. "No, don't touch my child." That scream echoed at the same time. The door burst open. Ethan rushed in, his eyes darkened like stone under the snow. He walked straight forward, blocking Kyle and Emily. "Get out of here," he said, "immediately." Kyle smiled faintly. "You have no right to interfere." Ethan clenched his hands. "I don't need rights, but I have security cameras, witnesses, and my own lawyer. If you touch them, this will be kidnapping." One of the two large men stepped forward. Ethan didn't hesitate. He twisted his shoulder, throwing a punch into his face. The sound of impact rang out coldly in the snow-damp room. The other lunged in. Sarah shouted, "The police have been called." Ethan pushed Emily and Noah back, shielding them with his whole body. In a few chaotic seconds, Kyle was pushed back, his face losing its smile. He pulled out his phone, but it was too late. The sound of sirens rang out outside the gate. The headlights of the patrol car flashed through the snow-blurred glass door. Two police officers walked in, fully armed, hands ready on their guns. "This is an illegal coercive alarm. Everyone step back." Kyle stammered something, but when an officer requested to present valid documents, he only said, "I will have my lawyer contact you later." The two men who followed him stepped back. The whole group was invited out of the center in silence. Afterward, in the small room, Emily slumped to the floor. Cold snow crept in through the unclosed door. She hugged Noah to her chest, her face buried in his shoulder. "We won't be taken away anymore," she whispered. That voice choked, but for the first time, not only because of fear, but because of anger. Noah rubbed his face into his mother's neck, his little hand tightening on her shirt. The baby didn't understand what had just happened, but he understood his mother was hurting, and he didn't cry. He was just silent. Sarah came to give a towel. Ethan stood behind, silent, his shoulders still tense. He saw something in Emily at this moment, a change. No longer the shy, evasive girl, but a mother ready to fight. At noon the next day, a video was spread on social media. Images from the security camera in the center, recording the entire scene of Kyle and the two men rushing in, threatening, and being stopped by Ethan. The online community exploded. Netizens found out Kyle's identity, tracked down old speeches, analyzed his facial expressions every second. Newspapers ran the headline, "Parliamentary candidate accused of trying to coerce a minor child from his birth mother." Ethan Blake, unexpected hero in the blizzard night. Emily and Noah stood on the porch, snow still falling sporadically. Ethan walked over, handing her an envelope. Inside was the emergency legal protection registration that Marcus had just sent. Emily said nothing. She just looked at him, then bowed her head to hug Noah. Against the white snow, three figures stood next to each other. Not perfect, but clear. No one was lost anymore. The King County Superior Court, Seattle, an ancient granite building with a high dome and long wooden benches as cold as iron on a rainy Monday morning. Emily walked through the large door with her hand holding Noah's tight. She wore the old white shirt and woolen coat that Sarah lent her. Her hair was neatly tied, her eyes dark circles from lack of sleep, but her back was straight, her steps even. Ethan walked behind, striding silently, like the shadow of an invisible protector. Marcus Bell stood waiting for them in front of courtroom number 4, a black vest, a thick file, but his eyes were gentler than usual. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked. Emily took a deep breath. "I've been ready since the day they tried to snatch my child from my hands." Marcus nodded, then turned and stepped into the courtroom. The courtroom was lit with white lights. Up high, Judge Monroe, a middle-aged African woman, her face serious but not cold, had taken her place. On both sides were the legal representatives. On the other side, Kyle Hargrove was wearing a grey vest, his hair combed, sitting next to Tasha Lopez, his eyes calm to the point of being artificial. Kyle occasionally glanced at Emily, no longer the anger as before, but the scary restraint of someone who clearly understood the balance of power was wavering. Tasha began in a calm voice. "Your Honor, we present that my client, Mr. Hargrove, is the legal father of baby Noah and has the right to request to share or regain custody of the child based on the psychological instability, income, and unclear living situation of Ms. Emily Carter." Emily raised her head, her face without expression. She had prepared herself for the worst. Tasha continued, "We provide a medical report from 2020 in which Ms. Carter was prescribed medication for postpartum depression. In addition, she currently has no official job, no stable housing, and illegally lived on a privately owned property." Marcus stood up, his voice slow but sure. "Your Honor, we do not deny that Ms. Carter went through a difficult period after giving birth. But like any single mother abandoned by her family, she fought to raise her child with her own hands, not stealing, not abandoning, and never receiving a penny of support from the child's father." Marcus held up a stack of documents. "We have testimony from Dr. Lena, who directly cared for baby Noah, confirming that he is well cared for, vaccinated on schedule, and developing properly. In addition, videos from the social center and testimony from staff, including Miss Sarah Kim, confirm Emily is a devoted mother, never having neglected or violent behavior." Judge Monroe nodded. "I want to hear the testimony of a medical witness." Dr. Lena stepped onto the podium. A simple white blouse, a steady voice. "I am the one who has been following baby Noah for the past 2 months. The boy is healthy, happy, has good emotional development, and is especially attached to his mother. If Noah is separated from his mother, I believe that psychological trauma is unavoidable." That statement made the air in the courtroom compress. Next was Sarah's testimony. She stood straight, holding the center's file. "Emily came to us with nothing but a backpack and her child in her arms. But within 2 weeks, she learned to cook, write a resume, take care of her child properly, and was ready to do anything kind to earn a living. I don't see a more devoted mother than her." Tasha interrupted. "She used to live in an abandoned house. That's not a place to raise a child." Sarah didn't flinch. "But that was the only place. No one chased them away. She chose to live in the coldest place, as long as she didn't let go of her child." The air was tense as Marcus stood up again. "Your Honor, we have specific evidence that Mr. Hargrove, when he was in college, used financial and reputational pressure to force Emily Carter to have an abortion. She refused, and as a result was kicked out of the house, cutting off all support." Tasha objected. "There is no evidence to confirm that this was intentional coercion." Marcus held up a printout of an email, the content of which was an exchange between Kyle and an old friend, in which Kyle wrote, "She's stubborn. Still won't give up. I'll let her understand the consequences." The court requested silence when whispers began to rumble under the audience seats. Marcus continued, "We're not refusing DNA testing. In fact, we actively sent samples from Noah and Kyle to an independent assessment center." He placed a file on the table. The results confirm Kyle Hargrove is the biological father of baby Noah. Tasha breathed a sigh of relief, but Marcus didn't stop. But the biological father does not mean a good father, and certainly does not mean being allowed to snatch a child from a single mother who has been raising him for the past 3 years without receiving any support. Judge Monroe was silent for a long time. After conferring, she tapped the hammer lightly on the table. Based on the evidence, testimony, and psychological assessment from experts, the court decides Emily Carter continues to hold full legal custody of baby Noah. The whole room went silent. Kyle Hargrove is forced to publicly apologize for his actions of approaching the legal process incorrectly and causing emotional harm to the plaintiff. The court does not consider the request to share custody in the next 12 months to ensure stability for baby Noah. Kyle turned pale. He said nothing, just stood up, turned, leaving Tasha with a rare look of disappointment. Below, Emily released her hands from the table. She looked at Ethan, looked at Marcus, then bowed her head to hug Noah, who was bewildered. Tears fell on her cheek, no longer tears of fear, but tears of someone who had regained the right to decide her own life. The hammer rang out for the last time, closing the trial. But in Emily's heart, another door was opening. The first spring evening after a long winter, the wind from Lake Washington blew through the quiet residential area north of the city. On the porch of the small house that Ethan was repairing into a new temporary home for the 2 mothers and children, yellow lights shone lightly from inside, casting the shadows of 2 people sitting next to each other. Not close, but not far. Emily was silent. Ethan too. Between them, just enough space to be quiet without being distant. Noah was asleep. The temporary house was warm enough for him to sleep deeply, no longer tossing and coughing like the nights before. Emily leaned back against the wooden column, her eyes looking out into the dark garden. "When I was 6 years old, I stole leftover rice in the kitchen," she said, her voice so small that it was as if she was talking to herself. "Just a few pieces of braised fish that my mother left, but my stepmother saw me." Ethan tilted his head. She was still looking into the distance, not waiting for him to react. "She slapped me, not 1 slap, but 3. Not because she was angry, but as if she was teaching me a rule." A light breath burst from her chest, both a sigh and a suppression. "Since then, I've always eaten quickly, secretly, as if food was something to be won, not given." Silence enveloped them. The wind whistled lightly through the porch, carrying the scent of damp grass and the smell of pine wood from the fence behind the house. Ethan placed his hands on his knees, his eyes looking down at the step. "I used to have a habit," he said, "after my son died. I used to sit in his old room, opening his birthday videos." Emily turned around slightly. 7 years old, Ethan said. He didn't like big parties. Just me, his mother, and a small cake. Once he told me, "Dad, I hope I can wish for the same thing every year, that we still have each other." He smiled lightly, a weary smile. I kept replaying that video to the point where I memorized every sound, but I couldn't stop. "Because that's how you don't forget," Emily said softly. "Also, how to punish myself," Ethan replied, his eyes not leaving the porch floor. "I was driving that day. Red light. Truck. I lived. He didn't." Both fell silent again. But now, it was a silence that wasn't alone. The night passed. The lake turned as black as ink. Inside the house, the wall clock steadily ticked away each second. Emily stood up first. She pulled out a thin woolen coat, putting it on. Before stepping into the house, she stopped, turning to Ethan. "If I'm not here anymore, would you be sad?" The question came out not as a farewell, but as a test, a small crack in the wall that had just been built. Ethan didn't turn around immediately, but his voice was steadier than the wind that was blowing. "I've lost a child before." Silent. "I don't want to lose another one." Emily didn't respond, but she nodded very slowly, as if acknowledging something in her chest that had just been named. The next morning, the early summer sun shone through the kitchen window. Ethan was making coffee when Noah ran barefoot from the living room. In his hand was an old photo, a photo of Ethan's family, placed on the bookshelf. Emily walked in after him, looking flustered. "Where did you get that? You can't take other people's things." "It's okay," Ethan said. He bent down, took the photo, and placed it in Noah's arms. Noah sat down on the floor, pointing at the woman in the photo, then at the man, who was Ethan in his younger years. Then he pointed at Ethan, then looked back at the photo, his lips moving. Grandpa. No one had time to react. The kitchen went silent. Noah looked up. "Grandpa," he said again, this time more clearly, as if he had just understood a connection that only a child's heart could know. Emily covered her mouth, her eyes glistening. Ethan sat down, his hand trembling as he placed it on the boy's shoulder. He said nothing, just bowed his head. But where his left chest was, something that had been weighing heavily like a stone for a long time, had broken, not with a sound, but with a first word. That evening, Emily sorted through the small wardrobe again. She found an old baby shirt, the one Noah wore when she first took him out of the hospital. The shirt was so small that she had feared she would drop him if she didn't hold him correctly. She placed the shirt on the palm of her hand, sat down on the bed, her eyes far away. Ethan stood outside the door, seeing her through the light shining out. He said nothing. He knew. There are wounds that don't see blood, that don't have scars, but are still there, like the low notes that linger under the background of a gentle piece of music. And it is they that give the music a soul. Late afternoon in mid-May, the sky of Seattle seemed to be shaken clean after a short rain. Fluffy white clouds floated across the roof, leaving the warm, early summer sunlight to slip through the maple trees that were putting out new leaves. In front of the small wooden house, which had been a derelict construction site and now had been repaired by Ethan into a home for single mothers, a few paper lanterns were strung between the white fence and the trees. The smell of baked goods spread from the kitchen throughout the garden, mixing with the smell of lavender along the stone path. Emily wiped her hands on her apron, placing the last tray of apple pie on the long wooden table placed in the middle of the yard. This was the first dish she had learned at Hope House, and the first time she had made it to invite others. "Does the cake look okay?" she asked Sarah, who was arranging the paper plates beside her. Sarah smiled. "The cake doesn't need to be perfect, just need to be sincere enough." Emily nodded. Her cheeks were flushed, not just because of the afternoon sun. Dr. Lena was the first to arrive. She brought a small Chinese pastry box and a set of porcelain teacups. "We need to drink something decent than filtered water," she said, her eyes dryly kind. Next was Marcus, this time not wearing a tie, his hair somewhat messy. "I brought apple cider. Not heavy, but enough to make someone accidentally propose," he said, winking at Ethan, then smiling. A moment later, people in the neighborhood also came, the workers who had helped repair the house, some mothers from the Hope House Center, children who ran around playing. Laughter rose like a light breeze, not loud, but spreading far. Noah was wearing a blue plaid shirt, holding hands with a girl with 2 braided brown hair, Ava, Megan's daughter. The two ran around the yard, laughing, stepping on the fallen petals. Ethan stood by the window looking out, a cup of tea in his hand. The slanting sunlight shone on his cheek, clearly marking each wrinkle of experience, but not hardship. He walked out onto the porch, where Emily was standing alone, her eyes following Noah. "You did well," he said, pointing to the pie table. "I heard Sarah say someone ate 2 pieces without knowing." Emily laughed. "Don't know if it's because it's delicious or because they're hungry." Ethan shook his head. "I think because they feel warm." A moment of silence. Then he pulled out a small envelope from his pocket, handing it to her. "What's this?" "A job offer. My new foundation will open a branch to support independent women. I need someone who understands them, standing there, like a hand reaching out at the right time. I think no one is more suitable than you." Emily held the envelope. She didn't open it, just looked at him. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I don't have qualifications. I don't have management experience and—" "But you have the experience of surviving," Ethan interrupted, "and compassion, things that no school teaches." Emily looked at the yard. Noah was hugging Ava, both falling into the grass, still laughing like crazy. "For the first time," she said slowly, "I see home is not 4 walls." Ethan nodded. "But a place where people want you to stay." She turned to look at him, not the gaze of someone being helped, but of someone standing up. As the sunset began to spread a thin orange layer over the roof, Marcus took out his camera. "Let's take a commemorative photo. Everyone stand here." Emily was embarrassed. I'm not used to taking pictures." "Then practice," Sarah laughed. "Today is the first day you officially belong here." Emily stood in the middle, Ethan on the left, Noah sitting snugly in his mother's arms, the evening light shining through his hair like a small halo. Click. Marcus looked at the screen. "Beautiful," he said. "Not perfect, but beautiful. Just like you guys." Emily looked at the photo, her heart softening. She didn't know if the future would still have storms, trials, or the shadow of the old days returning. But at this moment, with Noah's laughter, the warm eyes from the person beside her, and the smell of pie still lingering in her sleeves, she knew she had passed through the darkest part of her life. And what was ahead, though unclear, was no longer scary. On a morning in late April, Seattle opened its eyes to a light that wasn't exactly dazzling, but enough to call the birds back to the rooftops. The 2-story cream-colored building, with vines sprouting in front of the gate, had just opened at 6 o'clock. A small wooden sign hung in front of the porch, engraved with a simple line, "Horizon Center, where mothers begin again." In the first room on the ground floor, Emily bent down, carefully supporting the spoon for a young girl who was clumsily lulling her child to eat. "Don't put it straight into the mouth. Let him smell it. Play with it a little. When he reaches for it, that's when you bring the spoon to him." The girl looked at Emily, her eyes as if she was believing for the first time that someone was really listening to her. "Did you have to learn this way?" Emily smiled. "I used to think I would never be able to do it." The baby in the girl's arms opened his mouth. For the first time, not a miracle, but a beginning. A few blocks away, Ethan stood outside the iron railing of a private kindergarten. Through the glass, he watched Noah drawing with watercolors. The painting was 3 figures, a smiling child, a long-haired woman, and an old man with a grey beard, all standing under a yellow roof. "He's made a lot of progress," the teacher said as Ethan turned to leave. "Used to be afraid of noise, used to startle when someone spoke loudly. Now, he even reassures crying friends." Ethan nodded. He said nothing, but his footsteps when he left were lighter than the morning. Early in the afternoon, newspapers simultaneously reported Kyle Hargrove withdraws from campaign after series of investigations into shady spending, abuse of power, and deceiving voters. Below, was a photo of Kyle walking quickly out of the government building, bowing his head, not answering any questions. Some newspapers also unearthed old complaints from students, including matters relating to a pregnant girlfriend who was forced to leave school in 2019. Public opinion was not angry, simply turned away, like the way people close a door that was once thought to lead to good things. On the same day, Pamela, Emily's stepmother, was also called in for work because of forging documents to embezzle the property of her deceased husband. Her lawyer said, "We have no comment at this time." Emily only knew when Sarah handed her the phone. "Do you feel relieved?" Sarah asked. Emily pondered for a moment, then shook her head. "Number just feel no need to look back anymore." That evening, the small room on the second floor at Horizon Center was lit. Emily sat at her desk, recording the first day of official work in her notebook. Ethan walked in, placing a black book, leather-bound, with a cloth tie. "What's this?" she asked. "Journal," he replied. "Mine. Just a few paragraphs, written to keep myself here." She opened the first page, seeing neat handwriting, the ink slightly smudged because her left hand was pressed on it while writing, "The abandoned house I once intended to sell for profit finally became a place to save 3 people. And the human part in me." Emily stopped short. A moment later, she closed the book, placed it on the table, saying nothing. But the smile at the corner of her eye was enough for Ethan to understand she had read all the way in. Outside in the yard, Noah was sitting arranging small stones into a horizontal row. Beside him was Ava, his best friend, picking up fallen petals, sprinkling them on his head, as if playing dress-up. "What are you doing?" Emily asked, stepping out of the door. Noah looked up. "Making a road home, so anyone who gets lost can find it." She walked over, sitting down beside her son. "What is home to you?" the boy thought, then suddenly jumped up, running inside the house. A minute later, he returned, hugging Emily's legs tightly, then looking up, seeing Ethan stepping down the steps. Noah ran towards him, wrapping his tiny arms around his knees like an old tree. "Mummy! Grandpa!" The evening breeze blew through the garden, light as a blessing. Ethan bent down, his hand placed on the boy's head. No need to say anything, just an embrace, a warmth, a whisper that didn't need to be uttered. Emily stood there, her hand placed on her heart. A part of her, the part that was left behind at the freezing bus stop, in the hospital hallway, in the nameless house, finally found a place to stop. None of them were perfect, but they were all those who had gone against the wind, and now they stood still in the late season sun, together. Sometimes a home doesn't start from 4 walls, but from a hand reaching out at the right time, a non-judgmental gaze, or the first laugh that echoes in the cold attic. The story of Emily, Noah, and Ethan is not a fairy tale, but a testament to the most normal, but also the most powerful. Everyone deserves to stay, to be trusted, to start again. Have you ever stood in the middle of some winter, not necessarily outdoors, but still feel like you have nowhere to return? Have you ever held on to something small, hoping it will keep you from drifting away? If you are reading this far, thank you for giving this story a home in your heart. If you are precarious, I hope you find a bright light waiting for you to come home. And if you are embracing something very fragile, just keep embracing it, because maybe that is exactly what will save you. I wish you a good night's sleep tonight, and when you wake up, know that you have never really been alone.